Hello, you're listening to Milo Talks. I'm your host, Milo, traveling, living, and working full-time from my Class B van, meeting people along the way and asking them to share their stories with me. And I believe that in all these stories, we might just find a little bit more about ourselves. I'm thankful to know a variety of people in my friend network from all different parts of the world and walks of life. So these are the people I honed in on to ask a question. The question was, if they could make one change on this planet, but only one change, what would it be and why? As you can imagine, these conversations were very lengthy. So I took what I hope was the heart and the meat of the conversations and put them all together in this podcast. I started the podcast by calling my friend Jay, who I like to start the group sessions off because he's just a delightful person and I like his insight and he always makes me feel good about the questions I ask. So here is his answer.
So first, let me preface by saying that I love the fact that you have wonderful questions, not trivial questions like, where are we going to eat dinner, but questions that make you stop and think and consider what you believe and consider where you've been and where you're going. And when you ask a question like this, what would be one thing that if we could change anything in the world, it really makes you stop and wonder and pause for a moment and take stock of what that would be. I mean, it's not an insignificant question. And I hope people really take that into account and don't say, world peace or something like that, because you know what I mean? And I have been thinking about it. I've been thinking about it a lot. And if I could change one thing, it would be the way people see other people. And here's what I mean. I would love people to see people the way Jesus sees people. If you look through the stories of the Bible and you think of the woman caught in adultery, he could have been punitive and retributive at that point, but he had compassion and mercy on that woman. And you can go through example after example of where he had compassion and mercy and love for a person as opposed to judgment or, criticality or something else that we find so prevalent in today's world. And I truly, truly believe the world would be a completely different place. Because we all have filters, right? We all have truths. We all have lies. We all have those things that we've been brought up with that create the filters that everything that comes into our heart has to pass through. And if those filters are appropriate, then our response is appropriate. But if those filters are not appropriate, then the response is not necessarily appropriate. And if we have filters that have been crafted by Jesus in the way he sees people because they're his creation, it just changes everything. There would be no offense. There would be no shame. There would be no fear. We would see people for the best that people really are, for the way they were. If you want to be really spiritual about it, we can go back before the fall, the way Adam and Eve were before the fall of man, and that they were completely at peace and at rest with each other and with God. And I think that if we could change one thing in the world, that would be, for me, in my opinion, the most significant thing to do.
So I'm going to give you a little bit of background of where the question came from. Just full disclosure, it was me trying to make conversation with a stranger. I had opted to try a dating site. And like you just said, asking questions that are maybe more meaningful and more thought-provoking rather than what's your favorite band or what's your favorite type of food to eat. His was greed. He would remove greed. Mine was actually more like yours. Mine was simple. I want us to be kind, humankind, mankind. So very much what you're saying, but a little bit just more basic as far as like, if we could just innately in our instinct was just to be kind, like in every situation. you open the door. Everyday common things, right? Letting the person with the smaller amount of groceries go in front of you. Helping the person in front of you with the change because they're digging in their purse for a dime. Like stepping in. Now, people do this all the time. But what if it was magnified? So much so that common decency was just common. It was just part of our being on this planet. You and I have the same image.
Yes, absolutely we do.
It's just about opening your heart to everything around you and accepting it.
Right.
So that was mine. The next person was my friend Candice. Candice and I have known each other for a few years now, and she is from Trinidad and Tobago. And I liked her answer because she not only put the thought into it, but actually, I think, worked out a plan. So this was what she had come up with.
Yeah, I was thinking about that question along the lines of tolerance-ish, like that kind of thing. Something that tolerance and exposure. That's what I would say. Tolerance and exposure. And I think exposure may grow tolerance. And because of that, now this, stop me if you heard this one, but I'm thinking that maybe we could make act of service mandatory between a certain age. So you have at least 10 years. So between 18 and 28, you have to have this certain act of service done. And I was thinking about that in the context of what would allow people to meet other people, not necessarily people within their family. This is just the most diverse encounter that could possibly shape lives and influence, and then, cause just open-mindedness. So I came up with within the age group of 18 and 28, there should be an act of service. You have two options to choose. I know you said one thing, but it's the introduction.
Yes.
It's the introduction of an act of service, mandatory act of service for persons between 18 to 28 for 2 years. So they have two options. It's the only part that it becomes like two things. But is it really though?
Sure.
One is either you have to become a teacher or you have to become a nurse for 2 years.
Really? Those are your only two options?
Well, first of all, I wasn't even supposed to have two. Okay. So
no, but you're okay. So let's just break it down to the one. You said required active service.
Yes, mandatory.
Between the ages of 18 to 21.
28. So yeah, you have a 10-year window to get this thing done.
I would like to take your idea and make it just a little bit bigger, and that it's mandatory acts of service for that age group globally. Like because this is your one thing to change the world, that they have to do it in another country. Like you have to leave. You cannot do it in your hometown because it goes against what you're saying. If you said I could do active service and just go be a nurse in my community, what exposure to new people have I had if I live in, like our small town in Bay St. Louis, Mississippi? Like what exposure are they going to have?
Well, that would be making the assumption that we know everybody in this town, and then we assume that they all live like us, right? So that's why I didn't.
But as far as to get the true depth of it, going into a different culture, introduce and to give tolerance, and funny, I don't actually like that word very much, but because it means like I'm tolerant, I'm putting up with you. But I understand it.
Which is fine.
Sure. Is it fine just to tolerate somebody?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't think you're supposed to be able to just love or hate. You could just tolerate. That's that area gray, and it's fine. Like, it's fine. You just need to be able to function around someone that you don't have strong feelings for in either direction.
Oh.
And I would defend even making it local, because the reality is if we could change one thing about the world, we'd just give everybody money so they could travel to do this, but we don't, right? So I
It's a
think if
global
we could,
initiative. The money will be there. I
oh,
mean, it's like this is a free for all. Like it doesn't matter the cost. It doesn't matter. It was just like if you could bring one change. I mean, I like it. I mean, did you ever do any type of mandatory service when you're growing up?
no, but I thought of that question because I have a friend. He is German, and I believe now, I mean, I'd have this exactly correct, but they could choose between military and medical, like medical care,
Mm.
that kind of thing. And he chose medical care. And I remember one time he was telling me this story about an older lady, and he was just like, there was a tone of realization that, you get older and someone has to take care of you and you can't do certain things. And I had to help her with that. And I felt like that's why so far I had the idea of two things, which would be nursing or teaching, because I feel like if you know how to teach, you know how to learn and you know how other people learn. So I think that covers that basis. And with regards to like the nursing, I feel like if you know how that it brings you face to face with potential death. I feel like it's a
Mm.
humbling thing. It's a humbling thing to serve someone, but it's also a thing where you recognize how lucky you are. And if nothing else, you learn to take care of someone else. Like, let's say you just hard and you learn nothing else more than, okay, well, if somebody's walking slowly, this might be as a function of that.
Right.
So you have more of an awareness of other people. So that's why I'll go back to whether it should be like a global thing. I feel like you using that tone makes it seem like someone next door to you has the same exact culture as you, and I don't
Mm.
think that is true. That we don't exist like that. So I just feel like let's just expose people to more people,
Okay.
in the best way possible,
Okay.
so
In the
that they are
service.
faced, yeah, in a service industry
Okay.
where you just learn to just cope, and you learn, if you're a teacher or if you choose that teaching path, you learn how to learn so that you can teach.
Next is my friend T. I met him a few years ago while I was traveling in Paris. He currently lives in Paris, or just outside of Paris, actually. He is originally from Zimbabwe in Africa. So his entire life is so far removed and different from mine. And I was thankful he took the call, even though he rambled on. But here is his abbreviated answer.
If I could change one thing in the world,
Yes.
it would be the way. Well, I don't know how to phrase this with it just being one answer, but it would be meaning it when we say equality between men and women.
Oh. Oh. Like there would be no difference. Okay, so you're saying
No, not that there would be no
no. There
difference.
would be no inequality. It wouldn't exist. Like we would never have a
It,
sentence like that we need to make
yeah,
this something equal because it would just be
exactly.
equal.
It would just be equal, and and the reason I say that is because if we were equal and treated properly, or treated each other properly, or respected each other, it would have been the way the world is, the way things are, will be completely different. you know and it's not just about women running the country or countries or the world. It's more just, if we're allowed to allow like that kind of dialogue and those questions in the way that we can actually listen to women and not look at them as secondary citizens, as secondary people, or assume that they're not capable of doing certain things that that we assume that men should do. Because I mean, look at the world. Who's running it realistically?
Do you think that because of your background and seeing how women were treated in your country, is there more equality or less equality or any equality that you saw growing up? Like, did you see a difference between men and women in your country?
Yes, but then I don't even think you can compare the two. Uh, I feel like it's almost worse for first world women than it is for third world, because just like with racism in Africa, you know that someone's racist right off the bat. There's no there's no hidden. There's no it was the law. There's no what it's just a person who's racist in Africa, white person, is openly racist. And like, oh, guy's racist. We're cool, you know. So there's no. So the same way with women are not treated equally. It's not even a thing like, things like protests and stuff. There's none of that. If I tell you that I only really knew what feminism was when I moved to Europe, I mean, for me, I knew of the word feminism because you learned it in school. But feminism for me was something related to women. Now hear that. Something related to women. Can you imagine? So that's the only, like, if you had asked me that question, even at the age of 17, right? And to think that, like, I consider myself someone who's quite, open-minded and forward, whatever, which is true. But at 17, I didn't even have a proper, like, grasp on feminism. I knew that I mean, when I look back at my actions and how I am, one can consider me a feminist, but I was just that way, but I didn't, it would be like being, I don't know, being black and finding out that you're black.
Yeah, I can't. Right. I can't even wrap my head around that, honestly. But I get it. I get it.
Like, I mean, things like, if I go back to my village now, okay, I'm not talking the city, but still, you go to the city in someone's house, if they're African, you can be sure that if it's a house that doesn't have, if it's like, for example, a funeral, and it's a house, and people like all come together, even though during this time of Corona, you shouldn't really be all in close proximity, but people come to a house and people need place to sit eventually after hours of like sitting and mourning, and that's part of the whole tradition and the things that we do. But if there's not enough seats, the women will sit on the floor. And that's just like a given. No one even asks you a question. So when you then say, like, how do you explain feminism to someone who's in the village, for example?
Yeah.
Right? How do you even explain to them that a woman has rights when automatically, when there's not enough seats, the woman sits on the floor? Like, I mean, and also no one questions it. See, that's the thing. And so you're so far behind that how do you even catch up to it? And that's why I, from my perspective, would say that. But I'm not saying women should run the world, but, you can't then argue that, well, they would never let, like, given a seat at the table to even argue their point, their perspective, their opinion. And I don't say just equal rights because, it's the right thing to do. Of course, it's the right thing to do. We should always do it. But I mean, like, honestly, women have been pissed and shat on. Excuse my French.
That was in English.
So long.
I understood you. Go ahead.
Yeah. But for so long that it's like, it's now ridiculous. And the more people read and wake up or get there eventually, the more you realize how little power or change power we have with change that will happen. Also, being raised a man in Africa, you know what I mean, black or white. So although I may have a certain feminist side that I didn't know I had growing up, but that would have come from watching my mom and my sisters having to be in a certain position where I had the privilege that I didn't even ask for, but it was just given to me, that kind of thing.
Rob and I have been friends for many years, and I could tell he was very passionate about where he was in his life with his answer. And again, our conversation went on extensively, in part because we're good friends and we actually hadn't talked in a while. So here is the excerpt from our conversation.
There's only a million things you could say in this situation. So, and honestly, I didn't realize you had sent me the question till 5 minutes before you called me. So I probably should have read that earlier, but that's okay. That's okay. My answer would probably be And I'm going to base this answer on the fact that what's going on in this time of our world, because it's such a crazy, like, chaotic time. Nobody knows which end is up. And I feel like the biggest help for us right now would be doing away with the current media. I think that's my answer.
That's
getting
your
rid
answer?
of the media. Yes, getting rid of the media. Getting rid of the media.
Getting rid of the way we get the news, or how would you? Okay,
yes.
So how would you? You said go back to what?
I would go back to how it was done in the 40s and 50s, when you have somebody on the air literally just telling you the facts, what is going on in the world, and telling everything that's going on in the world, not just focusing on one problem and exasperating that problem and scaring people, making people run away from things, and just basically causing people mad panic and chaos. Because that's what's making this situation worse than it is the media portraying it as this horrible thing that's just killing everybody, when in essence, it's really not. It's definitely bad. It exists. It's bad. I'm not saying it's not, but it's not as bad as it's being portrayed. Okay, and there's so much negativity, and I'm tired of the negativity.
Yes. Okay, so let's go back to that for a second. So
sure.
I'm not saying you're wrong.
Okay.
Okay,
well,
first
cool.
I'm not saying that. There was no right or wrong answer. I'm not saying you're wrong, but I'm going to challenge you by asking you this. Do you feel, because neither you nor I were alive 50 years ago listening to the news.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So the bits and pieces that were sent over, because remember the movies, and they would like run this is us at war, and these are the women in your bombardiers. It was still processed information for the public. Get behind the war. This is what we're doing. We need you to not buy your stockings. So honestly, I don't think things have changed with the way people, the way we get information. Again, I don't think you're wrong. I'm just saying, I don't know if there was ever a time where we weren't being fed information to get us to
sway us one way or the other.
To get us in line, right? To get us in line.
I agree. I just think that the swaying is a lot more one-sided these days, and that's the issue I have with it. Is I feel like we're only supposed to believe this one way. It doesn't give people much of a freedom of choice now. It's telling them, hey, this is the way you're supposed to believe. It doesn't matter if it's ruining people's lives, ruining businesses, and having people, basically lose their house and everything they know. All that matters is that you believe what I'm telling you right now. And there's been so many different sources that have censored positive information that could help with the virus and help with cures and different things. As far as like Facebook has actually come out and said they will totally erase anything that has to do with what the mainstream media is trying to promote right now with the virus and everything going on. Mm-hmm. So they are totally censoring to the fact that where we're not even getting the information we could use to help us make an informed decision what we really want to do, because there's none of that available to us. And I'm saying it's left, it could be right. I don't care. It just needs to be the facts. I'm not trying to say politically it's one way or the other, even though I believe it is to one way or another. But that's beside the point.
You would just like everybody who's involved in media to have this absolute. It has to be nothing but facts, no opinions.
Right, the opinions. Exactly.
So let me ask you this. So this is obviously, you're the first person to actually take, well, not necessarily true, as far as like a current issue and like shine a light on it, because I asked a pretty broad question. Like you said, there's a million different ways we could have dissected this and talked about it. My question to you is this. If you and I were having this conversation when we met, if we go back in time, the answer you gave me today, I don't think would be the same. But can you remember the time before?
Sure.
When life seemed a bit simple, you didn't even have 4 kids yet. You didn't even have 4 kids. You had 2. So when you had 2, what do you think your answer would have been?
You know what my answer would be if this was pre-corona, all this, whatever this is going on right now. It would obviously, well, you knowing me, it would be make sure that everybody knows Jesus. And that's pretty much you would know that would be my answer. because I'm a Christian. No, I'm up to the bone, and this is just I think the hot point and the hot topic right now, and it's on everybody's forefront of their mind. So it resonates, I think, with a lot of people just because this is there's so many different opinions. Like, I've gotten in arguments. I've literally gotten kicked off of airlines because of it. I mean, there is a whole big story behind this.
Yes. I would love if the media just went back to just telling us some fun facts.
And I also want to know, like you said, I want to know, besides what this one thing is happening in our world, there's other things going on in our world besides Corona. And that's what I think bothers me the most, is there's no other news being talked about other than Corona. Like, the whole entire world could be in chaos, which it is, and other things could be happening all around us, which they are, and nothing is being discussed except for Corona. That's the only thing the news media talks about. And that drives me absolutely bonkers.
I can hear it. I can hear the bonkers.
Yeah.
I hear it. Another friend from Paris is my very dear friend, Michelle. And this is her very well thought out answer to my question. I did send you the question. Yes, you got it in advance so you could think about it?
Yes.
Okay. So if you could change one thing, and only one thing, what would it be?
So I decided not to think about it.
Good start.
And kind of come up with it as if you were to ask it to me, like this, right?
Okay.
Because it's more fun that way. So if I could change only one thing, I would say, oh, it's so hard. Is it like, can I add more clarity around the question, please? Is it
you can make this as grand or as small and highly laser focused as you want. It's open. It's just, if you could make one change, would you make a change that would affect the entire planet? Would you make a change that infected anything? Like, you have this chance to say,
okay,
I could make a difference. What would it be?
I got it.
Okay, I'm ready.
If I could change one thing, only one thing, I would let people make the right decisions. Because that kind of affects everything.
Okay. So we're going to have to break that down, because that's, when you say right decision, what's right for you, and we know this, is not necessarily right for the person next door to you. So let's change the language. I like the direction, but let's change the language.
But,
yes?
I mean, it's my change.
This is your change?
So obviously, I'm changing this in the world,
okay.
Right? So obviously, that also affects, like, what people think is right.
Okay. But where will that be defined? By what do you...
In my brain.
Okay. I understand. Let me back up about your accent for a second, just so people know where you are from, because
where you got my great accent.
Where are you from? Because I truly feel that some of these decisions that are being made in these conversations has a lot to do with where you're from and how you're raised. So where are you from?
Yes, I'm from the Netherlands.
Yes, and you are you have traveled. You live currently in Paris.
In Paris.
Yes.
Yes.
So, which is how we met.
Exactly. Which is another 3 episodes.
That's not the point. That's not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about here is your idea of right. Because isn't that where sometimes the problem lies, where your idea of right doesn't match my idea of right? So basically what you're saying, if you could change the world, you just...
I kind of feel like our ideas are right match, though. So if people can just adjust to our kind of idea of right, that would be great.
Okay, to elaborate on what we think is right is to allow people to live their life as long as they're causing no harm to themselves or someone else. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay. Everyone wants to say, well, world peace, but how do you get world?
Nah, I don't want world peace.
You don't want world peace?
I mean, that's an effect, right? Because if we have world peace right now, that doesn't mean that there will be world peace forever.
Sure.
And that doesn't mean that nature is going well. That doesn't mean that people are not fighting. That doesn't mean that animals are not being killed, right?
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that there's like no harmful situations between people. So,
yes.
I mean, I want to go beyond
Excellent
that.
point. No, that's excellent. That's an interesting way to look at it, actually.
Plus, I mean, like the last couple of months, I lived in a peaceful country, right? In a world peace country. However, in the greatest months of my life.
Well, you had pretty much a lockdown in Paris, correct? You couldn't leave without a written, stamped note.
Yeah.
Note as far as time and date as to when you left your house. Yeah. And you were allowed, 1 hour out a week?
A day.
A day.
1 hour
a
maximum, yeah.
Now that's been lifted, yes? You are free to roam?
I'm free to run wherever I want.
Okay. Good. So your answer to the question is everyone makes the right decision.
Yes.
Okay. This is my newest friend, Theresa. I owe a lot to her and her family because they are the reason I'm traveling full-time in my Travato van, which I purchased from them earlier this year. So I couldn't help but ask her, since she is new, I was so curious to see how she would answer this question. And this is what Theresa had to say. So did you come up with an answer?
Well, I did come up, I came up with 100 answers, but, and then they led into other answers. But I kind of tossed it back and forth and thought a lot about it over the past couple of days. And, I work in pediatrics and I see a lot of kids, and I work in New Orleans and deal with a lot of kids from all different socioeconomic levels. And so I think, the one big change I would make in the world, if I could, is that every child would have access to a quality education, like kindergarten through high school.
I'm curious how. I was surprised you went to education. I thought you were going to go to like healthcare, like every child would be,
Well, I think it would lead into that, possibly the likelihood, because, so I grew up in Virginia. I went to public school. I didn't grow up in New Orleans, which is, very heavy on the private school sector for anyone who's basically middle class and above. Anyone who can afford it here goes to private school. So I didn't know. Growing up as a kid, I just assumed everybody just went to the public school down the street, and that, it was good school system in Virginia. And then we moved here and had children, and my husband's from here, as you know, but we had children, and public schools really aren't much of an option here if you have the ability to pay for public schools. And I was just in awe. It just wasn't anything that I had known. I guess I kind of started to know about it as an adult, but it didn't really hit home till we moved here. And I just couldn't, because I went to school in Virginia, I went to school with everyone from, the neighborhood, but our neighborhood at the time there were projects on the one side of it, there was Navy housing on the other side of it, and then there was us the suburbs in the middle, and we just all went to school together. It was just how it was, and there was a good school with good teachers, and it was a good education, and I just assumed in my bubble of teenagehood that that's how the world was. And then when I learned it wasn't, and I deal with a lot of kids all day long from all different places, and there's a huge gap. And the saddest thing is that for the kids that are in public school, it's that they don't get quality teachers.
Sure, they can't compete, right?
No. And then what do you do with, what do you do with a kid who isn't getting a great education, but isn't able to self-teach because they don't have the support at home. So at least if there was access to quality education across the board, I don't know the answer, but I just think it would open a lot of eyes and give a lot of opportunities that don't exist.
We may not have the power to actually bring about one big change that will affect everything and everyone on the planet. And we can't, in most cases, bring instant change to any of the causes that we care so much about. But being a hopeful person that walks on this earth, I would like to think that these conversations do bring some change and keep the positive narrative on the forefront so that we don't start drowning in the negative. So hopefully this gave you some insight. If you feel like sharing with me what you would do to bring one big change or one change to the world or to a community or to anything or to any cause that you have, I'd love to hear from you. I do have an email. It's milotalkstostrangers@gmail.com. Feel free to write me. I'd love to read what you have to say. Thanks for listening. A heartfelt thank you to all my friends who participated. I'm sorry I had to cut some of your words short. So many of you had so many great things to say, some more than others. You know who you are, but thanks for participating.
Thank you for listening. You can find me at Facebook at Milo Talks, and also you can email me at milotalkstostrangers@gmail.com.